Pardon, what was that?
It's going to be a very valuable resource, I imagine,
For whom?
for anyone who wants to view these videos.
Okay, yeah, that's the intention. The
Mm.
Buddha talked about it as teaching for future generations. That
Mm-hmm.
was the language that he used. So, you see, most people expect uh, results that they can see. The Buddha plans on having results that are going to he and all the people he know are going to be dead before the results. And in a way we're still looking for.
Well, that's very noble.
Well, not only that, but there has been nobility all along. It's just really interesting that I think that it has to do with the Christian influence on Western society. Even though the people themselves are no longer Christian, many of the mindsets. And so what they tend to do then is to put Buddha up on the same shelf as Jesus, which is
Mm-hmm.
really on a high shelf up there.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I used to look at it is like that there is a ladder to Jesus, but all of the rungs are missing. Perhaps because they were worn out.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. But in any case, that's we, we look at it in the sense uh, that we do things for value, for benefit, for wholesome, but we're not looking to see the results. And that is, in fact, part of the noble right view that you were mentioning, because ordinary right view ripens in clinging because they expect results.
Yeah.
And that the results may be there, but we may never see them. And so that's part of behaving nobly, is that we're interested in doing the right thing and not getting the right results.
Mm.
Now, that issue is actually quite widespread all over and has many, many different examples. Possibly the worst example would be the medical doctors who allowed themselves to, let us say, experiment on patients who were in
Mm.
Auschwitz and other places like that, so that they could do whatever. Because in fact, the important thing was is that they make breakthroughs in medicine. In other words, the
Right.
doctors want results no matter how much suffering they cause.
Yeah.
And in a way, that same is true. I think, in fact, gosh, it must have been in the late 80s when there was a huge movement to stop animals from
Mm-hmm.
being experimented on,
Mm-hmm.
because the people could see that yeah, not only were a lot of animal products put into cosmetics and other things like that. In fact, they advertise them, like beeswax or whatever like this. Now they don't do that so much anymore. The advertisers don't advertise the animal products that they have in their manufactured goods, because if they do, some people like me is going to come knocking on their door. Some of us have sledgehammers to knock with. Yeah, there was a big incident about there was a huge, I don't know whether you'd call it a kennel or not,
Mm.
but these people broke into that kennel and stole all of the animals, and then put pictures in the paper, the newspaper they bought the place, and photographed many of the animals for this animal would like a home kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In other words, they made a big point of it that these animals that were stolen from this pharmaceutical company, I think it was. So that's very interesting, like that we even begin to see, because it's been very slow, you see. But humans have gotten to the point of understanding that animals do have feelings.
Yeah. Well,
And
some.
therefore,
Some of the humans, I mean. All animals have feelings. Only some of
Well,
the humans understand that.
well, the same humans that don't understand that animals have feelings are the ones who think that it's okay that they mash on other humans' feelings. That human feelings don't matter, even if they're real.
Right, so
That
it's a general...
only me
Yeah,
matters.
yeah. So it's lack of empathy.
hmm lack of knowledge, and that is how almost every farmer treated his animal. They had a horse, especially the horses. Horses were used to be beaten regularly. Why? Because you can get a horse to work to death if you
Yeah.
keep beating him. And they finally started passing, so some of the city slickers could come by and see that these farm animals were being mistreated by the farmers. And they went back and knocked on the doors of the legislature and had some of those laws changed. And I know in the South, when I was a child, that that the farmers did not, even in the 1950s, want to abide by the regulations of how they should have to treat animals. I think nowadays they just ignore those laws. But when those
Yeah.
laws came into effect, they were greatly hated and vilified. But meanwhile, the people who see an animal as a pet, like a dog, will get much, much better treatment than dogs did 50 years ago, 60
Mhm.
years ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so, as Martin Luther King said, that uh, something like that justice is on an arc in the universe, and eventually everything bends towards justice.
Mm.
Um, a, a way of looking at that is basically justice comes from knowledge,
Okay.
and that when everybody lived in a small town, everybody's bad behavior eventually got around the gossip vine.
Mhm.
So if someone wanted to be or was caught as a criminal, he had to leave, or if he wanted to be a criminal, he better go be a criminal someplace else because here he's going to get caught. That
Right.
mentality is what kept the caste system going in India for so long. But now
Mhm.
they figured out if you're a low caste, and here's, in fact, this is how it happens most commonly. The the low caste woman, Sudra, will somehow bribe her friends or get something so that she can become the housekeeper for a Brahmin.
Okay.
She then sees how the Brahmins dress, they see how the Brahmins talk, they clean up after the Brahmins, etc., like that. And after about 10 years, the woman's got enough money that she buys the saris and all of the stuff. And so she gets on a train and goes to a city, and now she's a Brahmin because she knows how to behave like one. And all of a sudden, the
Right.
Brahmin class just started blossoming with new Brahmins. Because all it took was a train ride away and some
Uh-huh.
knowledge. So that whole idea of local has to do with the knowledge.
Uh-huh.
The Sudra could never become a Brahmin in her own community because they knew her already. She's got to go someplace new. So the cityfication meant that anybody could become anonymous simply by walking to the next block or so.
Mhm.
All right. The internet is beginning to change that now and turning it back into a
Mhm.
global village so that everybody is known. And in that regard, um, the dirtiest politics that we find in the United States, the brilliant idea or the brilliant part is that we can find them. Far worse things used to be done and
Yeah.
nobody knew.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's because of technology. For instance, you probably heard that the Saudis have gotten caught with killing a journalist in their own embassy in Turkey.
No.
You had no, and it's a big, big, big deal right now. And the worst
Yeah.
part of the big deal is that uh, Donald Trump himself is the only person in the world who is siding with the Saudis. Everybody else in the U.S., including all of the Republicans and certainly all the leaders in Europe, are wanting to know what the hell's going on here and why is Donald Trump, without any evidence, supporting the Saudis. The answer is money, 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 money. All right. But the point that I'm making here is that if it hadn't have been for an Apple wristwatch, no one would have known, and no one would have been asking any questions. But this journalist wore an Apple iWatch into that thing and had his execution videotaped.
Wow.
Wow. And part of the big deal of it, to finish the story, is that the Saudis sent two airplanes, chartered aircraft, full of people, 15 in all, to the embassy just to do this deed. And one of them was the very well best known autopsy expert in Saudi Arabia, complete with bone saw. Right. And Trump is supporting them when they've got video evidence and they've got documents of passports, and they've got, I mean, the Turkish government's got these guys named by name, and the press has shown, oh, yes, you've got this name saying this guy was in the embassy when this guy was killed, and now we have these photographs of this guy guarding the prince, the new prince of who's actually the monarch in Saudi Arabia. His old dad just gave it the monarchy to his son, and his son did this journalist in because they're enemies. So you have motive, you have opportunity, and you've got solid hard evidence, and it's all over the press. And Donald Trump supports. Isn't that? But the point is that we have evidence now because information is getting out.
Hmm.
And the same way that that information, just because of an iWatch, well, you think that iWatch was something, you watch to see what this laptop does. All by its little lonesome and its connections to YouTube. All right,
Hmm.
that's so it's information. It's information. That's the whole idea. Is that information was slow in the time of the Buddha, but information has a quality that, when I say it information, what I'm talking about is true information.
Okay.
Because incorrect information doesn't last, it rots. It might excite for a short time, but enduring wisdom actually endures.
Hmm.
Okay, even though there is a continuing revolt against Darwin, the revolters are getting cornered because they don't have the truth on their side.
Right.
And what we mean by truth is evidence. A clear example on that is that Ken Ham built a huge, um, uh, supposedly 100% replica of an ark, but he did it in Kentucky, and has it up on concrete post. They put in a huge parking lot and said they're going to have 1 million people coming, and they got the local governments and the state government to give them one thing after another as a gift to get them to put that thing in there. Guess what? The For 1 million people a year, you're going to have a queue that they have lines on, with sometimes metal bars. You can see those like at airports. You've been through several queues like that. They
Yeah.
had a huge queue that never had one person ever stand in it. That's right. The town is 100 to disappointment. The people who moved in and opened businesses in anticipation of the ark going opening and having a huge business, they've all left now, and the town is actually more worse off for business than they were before they did this thing.
Oh dear.
And Ken Ham blames the press.
Okay.
Why would he blame the press? Well, for one thing, that's what Donald Trump does, and so that's the thing to do, to blame the press. Well, what are the press doing? They're reporting what's happening, and what's happening is nothing. And so that vicious circle of a lie just goes like
Yeah.
that.
Can't do it
If there
anymore.
was anything to the Noah's Ark, in fact, they would have millions of people going in and visiting and all of that. But it
Mhm.
was not only was it overly expensive, like $100 million. It was only well planned to the point that they should have maybe opened the thing and then expected the business to grow the way, for instance, Disney did.
Right.
Okay, that Disneyland got started small and it grew and it grew and it grew, and by the time that it was big enough to completely outgrow the room they had in Anaheim, they moved to Orlando. But they still opened it when they had something to show, and then they grew and grew and grew and grew more. All right, that's how Disney did it. This guy says, "Oh no, we're going to have 100% of everything we're going to build. We're going to have everything done before opening day." And so there was no organic growth. It was all just the delusion of creationism was the only thing they had going for them. And also the sister delusion that there were enough Christians in the United States that would all flock to this thing simply because it was Christian. It
Right.
didn't happen. It didn't happen. It didn't even have a spike or a spurt at the minute. They opened up and nobody ever came.
Shit. That's a lot of wasted resources.
Absolutely, and the town and the community and the original backers and everybody is unhappy with Ken Ham, and Ken Ham is unhappy with the press. So that's another example, or that's a very, very clear example in big time. And I like to give really big examples because when we can see examples like that, then we recognize that, oh, that happens in very little levels too. That's one of the reasons why people, when they're telling you a lie, it's already started to rot, even in their own mind. That's why they want you to agree with them. And that's where all these facial gestures are coming from, is because that's used to prop up the lie that can't support itself. Well, you also know that on the other side of the coin, that real truth, especially valuable truth, is almost always kept in secret.
Hmm. What's that?
In other words, when truth is valuable, it's supported by lies.
When truth is valuable, it's supported by lies.
Hmm? All right, let me give you the first example of that is The Art of War
Sun
by,
Tzu.
I forgot, Sung Tu. Right. Everything that book is about is a book of lies. Let me give you a
Okay.
few brief ones. If your army is scattered, make it look concentrated. If your army is concentrated, make it look scattered. If your
Right.
army is small, make it look big. If your army is big, make it look small.
Okay.
If you're ready to attack, make your enemy think you're in retreat. And when you're in retreat, make them think that you're on attack, etc., etc., etc. And it goes on and on and on and on like that, as the art of war. Well, guess what? We're not at war.
Hooray!
We're not at war. Isn't that amazing? All right. If we're not at war, then we do not then have to hide the truth by hiding it with lies. But they have, for all of these years with the Buddha, hidden the truth and kept it secret within the Dhamma or within the Sangha because it was dangerous to let it out. Why?
Right.
Because those people who knew the truth did not want it spread, they wanted it suppressed. So, in fact, it was not suppressed from inside the Sangha, it was suppressed in the Sangha because of the forces from the outside.
Okay.
That one of these forces, in fact, probably the most primary force, was that the Brahmin religion wanted to bring Buddhism in because they fought it and lost so many times. The new idea that came by with Buddhaghosa and his crowd was, oh no, let's just make Buddhism into a religion. That's all we have to do. And then we'll claim it's part of our religion because hungry Hindus,
Yeah.
anything that stinks of even whiffs of a religion is theirs. And so they give the Buddha what uh, a number 24 in a line of some sages or something like that, and
Okay.
all of this magical stuff gets put into the suttas and that kind of thing over time. So it
Okay.
became a religion because that religion part of it was a lie, but in fact that lie protected the truth.
Okay.
Because if the truth is out and open, it's going to get shot. But the truth worked for the Westerners because now the Western idea is that enlightenment hasn't you haven't had any enlightened beings in hundreds of years, or you've heard those kind of talks before, or that
Mhm.
it's extremely difficult. And not only that, but much of the talk in the West is to say, oh, the attributes of a Buddha are actually attributes that are not attributes in our way of thinking. In our society, those are things that you put people down for. And that's part of the
Yep.
issue I think that you got with your mom, that the very things that you're learning are really worthwhile having, she's condemning. But the point of view is that it's not your mom that takes advantage of those things, it's the power lords. If the power lords can lie to the people and make them afraid so that the power lords can control the people. But if the people are fearless or if they're knowledgeable, they recognize that the power lords don't have any control over them. That's why I sent you that video about what happened to Angkor.
Right. Yeah, I never got around to watching that.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, you've got to.
No.
Oh, it's your life story, boy.
Really?
Yes. I say that in the deepest Southern accent as I can. That's your life story, boy. What happened to Angkor? It was a huge city. When I
Mhm.
mean huge, it was like a million or more population when London had 20,000. That's one of their advertisements.
Wow.
It was spread out all over the place and it was lost in the jungle. But when it was rediscovered, the only thing that was left was stonework. And that is just so impressive that people will spend weeks there at Angkor Wat just marveling at all the stonework, not realizing that most of the city was wood.
Huh.
Ah. So when you get that idea, you say, "Oh yeah, now what I see is London time like it is now, rather than like it was in 1400." Okay, so this was a huge city, and it was Hindu,
Okay.
and they had all of the structures of a king and all of that stuff like that. But then slowly, and one of the things about that video, they don't really tell you who took Angkor finally. Who took Angkor finally was the Siamese
Okay.
from Thailand. In
Yeah.
other words, what I'm saying is that it was a 1-2 punch. The first thing that happened is that Thailand gave Angkor Buddhism,
Okay.
and then waited 50 years until everybody figured out they did not have to join the army. They did not have to support the king. That the king actually had no control over each and every individual there, that it was the people who were believing the lies that the king had told that made the kingdom operate. And when they became Buddhist, they quit. And it fell into decay and decline all its own. And then those who were in Siam, they just walked in. They didn't even have to have an army to take over. Why? Because there was really nothing left to take over. But they did take the gold back to Ayutthaya. Tons and tons and tons and tons of gold. So that's what happens with information. If that can happen at Angkor, what's going to happen in Europe or in America when the noble Dhamma gets out?
A lot of change.
A lot of change will happen because people will recognize that, oh, they're free. That in fact, everything that keeps us from being free are the lies that we've been told and that we believe. In other words, it's our delusions. When we stop having the delusions, that's the freedom. Because the real bondage is the lies. And the lies are told in order to control us by the powerful. And guess what? Those same powerful people are also not in control. It's their greed that's in control. Because there have been, for instance, Emperor Asok. He became an emperor through his greed. But unfortunately, his background and also meeting a few monks and beginning to understand the Dhamma, and now all of a sudden, Asok is completely a philanthropist. He stops building armies and starts building roads and way houses and makes life really, really easy for his people. That's the way a real emperor should act. And yet none of the normal emperors do. They normally operate selfishly, and none of the people recognize that they can just walk away from the guy. He really has no power over being able to shout and yell and kill somebody occasionally. That's all he can do. But he cannot tell you what to do.
So part of my experience in coming away was missing what I had going on here. Do you think that that's based in delusion?
You went to the retreat kind of in a defiant and yet what I'm talking about is the connection, the thread, the rubber band between you and your mom, because your mom was not supporting of you.
Yeah.
That she was against it. Okay. And that, how to say it? I'll say it like this. The older a person is and the more mature they are in life in general, the more they recognize how much they owe their mom.
Okay.
But young people, they are even more dependent upon mom, but they're not willing to admit it. But as the wisdom of old age comes, so now I'm pointing out that we need our moms in the beginning, we need our moms in the middle, and we need our moms in the end. The Buddha is very, very particular about that the mom is the most important person in anyone's particular life, and that we owe it. He even said it in the position of, even if you were able to carry mom and dad around on your shoulders for their whole life so that they didn't have to walk or do anything, you still wouldn't be able to repay them for the gift they gave you by fucking around. That we owe our whole lives to mom. And we can see that, or let us say that that's true at a deeper level, even if we can't see it at an intellectual level. And that was part of what was causing that tension, that internal conflict, that agitation that you were having when you went to the retreat.
Yeah, big time.
All right. And yes, you can see that in retrospect. Even you could see it then, we talked about it, but you weren't able to say, okay, now that I see that, let me pick it up as a unit and set it aside, and off we go into freedom. Well, you weren't able quite ready to do that yet.
No.
And yet now you can see, at least intellectually, you could put all of that aside and say, yes, Mom, I love you. Thank you for your wisdom, but I've got a new wisdom to follow now. I've got I'm marching to a different drummer drumming right now, Mom.
This tension is still present. This is what I'm working through. This conflict.
So you can see it as a conflict when in fact it's not. It's not really a conflict. We do have obligation to Mom, but we have even another obligation to the Dhamma, which is a higher kind of Mom. Big Mama. Some people refer to it as Mother Nature, or Gaia as Ma Earth,
Hmm.
but they're still thinking microscopically. Oh no! Einstein knew a whole lot more about Mother Earth than Mother Earthers know about Mother Earth. Because when we recognize how complex things are, the deeper we go into it in that level, there's a huge amount of complexity until it gets down to being very, very simple. It all boils down to particles and their charge. And we wind up with only quarks and electrons. That's about all we've got. But with that and putting them together, when you put quarks together, then you become to have either protons or neutrons. And so the positive charge is somewhere buried into the relationship between quarks. But us good old electrons, we're good to go, until we recognize, wait a minute, I'm nothing but a swirl in space. That's what quantum field theory says, is that the electron is nothing but a field, and it can spin one way or another, but it still has a negative value. Doesn't matter which way it spins. But let's not get off into particle physics. Let's just recognize that there is something deep down in there that we must rely upon as a foundation. That's mom. And that the physical mom that we have is just a lineage that comes out of that. And what we bring here from mom is the instincts, our old programming, our ability to breathe and to eat and to think and to walk around and all of that kind of stuff. And look how closely your mom has gotten you to actually being a happy human being. Only that far. She's gotten you all the way from quarks, all the way through big bangs, all the way through Gias, all the way through Napoleons and ice ages and all this kind of stuff. We even lost our hair, some more than others. And your mom has gotten you to the point that now you're capable of being fully human. You've got everything you need now. And we need to thank mom for that. But now is our turn. Now is our responsibility. And so we pay homage to the past. We pay homage to what got us here. And now we have to move on. And how we do that? With wisdom, with knowledge. And in fact, you can recognize that much of what we know now is because of the collection of knowledge that's happened over time. And I feel really fortunate that somewhere on planet Earth, there were some people who were noble enough to become noble and to pass it on, that there is freedom. There, but there's the other side of that coin, and that is that the Buddha said that he did not invent it, that the
Yeah.
path to freedom was an old path, a
Hmm.
trodden path. And when we look at some of the very interesting folks from the past, like Lao Tzu, Chang
Hmm.
Tzu, Zoroaster, um, Jesus, especially my good buddy Socrates. When we look at these guys, we can see that, oh no, wisdom was always available to the few who would go looking for it. What we have from Buddha is that not only did he find it, but he made a method whereby every one of us who applies that method can also find that path to freedom, the final freedom.
I'm still
Cause,
scared.
pardon?
I'm still scared.
Till scared of what?
The path, freedom.
The the past or the
The
past?
path. The path.
The past.
No, no, the path.
The path.
And of freedom.
Huh? Yeah, that's actually a downside. Freedom, how to say it? Most people think, in the ordinary way of thinking, is freedom means the freedom to. But the deeper freedom, the freedom of the Buddha, is freedom from.
Yeah.
Okay, what do I mean by that? The freedom to means the king or the prince or the cop or whatever or my daddy won't let me go do what I want to do. All right? But we also do not have the freedom to say no to ourselves.
Hmm.
And so we blame daddy for telling me I can't go out tonight when in fact he never should have had to say that. I should have been able to figure that out for myself. And so now we're recognizing, oh no, the problem is not the freedom to do what other people say don't do. The real issue is freedom from the desires or the drives to go do the things that they're telling us not to do in the ordinary way. We have to look at that a little bit different in the situation of, well, what if mom, without her wisdom, thinks that what I just said is true when in fact it's not? In other words, she's telling you, no, don't go figure out who you are because mom herself would be afraid for Danny to figure out who he is.
Terrified.
Right. So guess what? Even in this case, that fear that you're experiencing, that terror that you have, is not yours. Doesn't belong to you. It was inherited at best.
I think it was rammed in the night before I left for Thailand, actually.
So what you have to show your mom is that there's nothing for her to be afraid of. As opposed to you working on this fear right now, because that fear is a borrowed fear. It's not your fear anyway. And so what is it that your mom's afraid of? Of losing you? Perhaps when she finds out that she's not going to lose you. And so that can happen two ways. One is that you don't leave Bristol again, because that was terrifying. And the
Hmm.
other one is for her to come to understand that she never had you in the first place. That was also part of the delusion that all moms have, and most dads, like 99% of them. I'm your dad. You do what I tell you to do. Have you ever heard that? Come here to
Oh,
this
yeah.
house, you'll hear it sometimes. It works on a 5-year-old. At 6, I'm not sure.
My dad's still giving it a shot with the 32-year-old.
Well, it
That's
depends
doing
upon
pretty
what the
well.
mental age is of the 32-year-old physical. What's
Say
the
again.
mental age? Because
Ah,
normally the 32-year-old will not be 32 when dad's starting to talk like that. He becomes 5 years old again, mentally. Or he can grow up to the age of 16 and say not only no, but hell no.
there were plenty of those.
Uh-huh. But to be fully grown up to that age of 32 is, Dad, let's sit down and have a talk.
Uh-huh.
That's the way to handle it. Dad, let's sit down and have a talk.
Well, we are having those talks, and they're good. But I don't yet have the conviction that's required to give them faith in what I'm doing.
From my late teens until well after I was ordained and all that. She
I
really
lost you.
did.
I lost you for about a minute there, Dhammarato.
Okay. Um, I said that the conversation that you're having with your parents now took me 25 years to have that conversation with my mom. That conversation lasted 25 years.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Well, much of that conversation had to do with what it was like to be on the inside of a Southern Baptist church. So I don't expect it to take you quite so long.
You were on hard mode.
Yes, there's something about that old time religion that can
Yeah,
get really, really stuck in. And but she, um, let us put it this way, she was there to support me at my second ordination. The first ordination that I had was in Thailand, and she gave permission. And that's, by the way, something you probably don't know, that everybody, no matter what his age is, has to get his mom's permission,
I think you told
and
me.
that it's a big deal.
Yeah,
I had to show the letter from Achan Po from my mom saying that it was okay to ordain,
yeah,
and that when it became not okay later, we had to take that factor into consideration also,
right.
which led to a premature trip back to the United States and eventual disrobing because my mom needed me. And guess what? That's the second time it had happened. My second
Wow.
ordination was finished because mom had an automobile accident and got into a really deep situation at the same time that the manager of her business, the rest home, quit.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether the quitting caused the accident or what. I'm not sure of the timing, but I know that that was a kind of an emergency situation again for the family. Well, guess what? One more step in that direction. The guy that's the example of all of this would ordain and then disrobe and then ordain again and then disrobe a few, or let us say he would disrobe only for the season, and then he would ordain and stay ordained, perhaps for several years. But when another drought came, he would disrobe, he would go back and help his mama, and when the drought was over or whatever, then he would robe up again. And he, in this one example, this one guy did that 7 times. So that's kind of the way that it is. But in all cases, mom has everything to do with it.
Yeah.
All right. So uh, that's something that you and I didn't discuss, because when you came to Thailand, you were not talking to me about the possibility of becoming a monk. You were keeping that part secret. If you had, we would have had that conversation then.
Yeah.
Okay. This conversation is needed in the sense that we need to understand that we do have, in fact, it's through mom that we get all of our programming, all of our instincts, all of our existence. Our ability to breathe, even, comes from mom, and to a less degree, dad. But everything, and so that in the Buddhist way, our entire connection to the world is through our mom.
No, I should mention I have more support from my biological mother than I do my father and stepmother. My father and stepmother are the difficult ones. My mother,
Well, in that regard, you're home, at least halfway home,
uh-huh.
because your real allegiance is to your real mother. That the stepmother is trying to take on that responsibility. Let me ask you what age you were when she became your stepmother.
9.
I can see her connection. You
Yeah.
got to pay her homage too.
Yeah.
Listen, without her hard work, you wouldn't be here now.
Sure.
Age of 9 is still a very dependent age, and so you have to give her that due. If you had said 17, I'd have said, don't
Yeah.
worry about her. But at age 9, no, that's a big deal.
They've been great parents. My father and stepmother. My mother's parenting was very short-sighted. She's very, very sensitive and would do anything to stop me and my sister crying, including feeding my sister to obesity. My father and stepmother stepped in when I was 11, I went to live with them because I was behaving very, very badly for my mother. So I went to live with father and stepmother,
Well,
and they
we
taught
know
me how to
why you
behave.
were behaving very badly with your mom is because she let you do it.
Yeah. Oh, she absolutely did. Yeah.
And you got with Dad, and all of a sudden he put the brakes on that, and you
Yep.
both thank him and hate him.
Yep. Well, I actually asked to go and live with my father, and I knew that he would straighten me out. I kind of wanted it.
So everything is proceeding along. Here's the thing, though. You have to still now recognize that you've got these ties, and
Yeah.
that these ties that you have are not intellectual, they're deeper than that.
Hmm.
And so when they say jump, the, while the intelligence either may say how high, or, that joke, or the intelligent part is going to say, ain't no way that's going to happen. But meanwhile, the body is already in midair.
Yeah. Yeah.
The old reptilian, in fact, the very way that they do connect you is the way that they connect you.
Right.
And so recognizing that will help with the wisdom to see, oh, that's just old programming,
Hmm.
just the old programming. These feelings are sankhara. They're old. That's really an important quality of Paticca Samuppada, is to recognize that step two of sankhara.
Hmm.
That our language is ground in, and our feeling, and the way that we feel, and the way that we're supposed to feel is ground in. It's given to us from the outside. That we do
Hmm.
not choose to feel the way that we want to feel. We feel the way that we learn to feel. But you do not have to continue to feel the way you learn to feel.
I know that, and
You can you can change that.
and it feels pivotal in that, and this is why I've been choosing not to practice correctly, is because I feel that once I do, I'm proving to myself that I can choose my feelings,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm um I'm making a choice. I'm making a strong
No,
choice, and
no.
it
What you're doing instead is you're saying, I have allegiances, and that right now I'm going to follow those allegiances because I know that becoming free from those allegiances is going to cause some people some pain. And the answer to that is not if you do it wisely enough. Because it's not your mom you need to be free from. It's the way you feel.
but in doing that, I'm saying I don't need what you think I need. I don't need the kind of security that you think I need, that you would see me have.
You're talking to mom now, not to me, right?
I'm talking to dad and stepmom.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, but that's not what you want. That's not the message that they want to hear. So, in this regard, how to say it? In Buddhism, there is a different way to practice Buddhism with the concept of generosity than it's done in Christianity. In
Hmm.
Christianity, it's expressed in the golden rule is to treat others the way you want to be treated.
Hmm.
Within Buddhism, it's different than that. We learn to treat people the way they want to be treated. That's the gift, is give them gifts they want to have. That's what you
Right.
need to do, is to learn to give your parents the gifts that they want to have. That's what will make them happy. So what you're doing now in the Dhamma, you need to take it from being, how to say it, your Dhamma is not defying your parents. It's
But it feels,
refining the way that you feel.
but it feels like it is. because if I can choose my feelings and I can be happy without a mortgage and a pension, that's the gift that my dad wants. My dad
You're
wants
okay.
me
I
to.
know that your dad wants that when he talks to you, but really what he wants is something that's emotional. In other words, when you connect deeply with your dad emotionally, because that's the connection that he really wants. He wants to believe that you listen to him.
He doesn't know it. He's very stunted emotionally.
Well, that only means that you got your task cut out for you. So let's see if we can work this thing through.
It's
Uh,
already it's already happening. I'm already
uh-huh.
connecting with my father way deeper than I have before. Nonetheless,
Excellent.
he it's great. It is great. He currently is still in, and I don't know if he'll remain this way until he dies. His conditioning towards the mortgage and the pension is so deep.
Okay, I understand that. Believe me, I understand that. I know that. I know that. But it's based in fear for him. Perhaps what we need to do then is give him the gifts of joy in the sense of, Dad, I am so proud of you. Look what you've done.
I'm giving him that,
You've
and he
done a
loves it.
real right. So you stay with that. Even though he turns around and bites you, oh, well, you go out and do the same thing. You can come back. Well, Dad, I'm not really up to your level. Maybe by the time I'm your age, I'll be as wealthy as you are at your age now.
Yeah, I mean,
And start opening this door. You
he
see,
had a
what would,
mortgage. He had a mortgage by the time he was my age.
okay, but that didn't make him happy.
Well, he thinks he is happy, I think. I'm not so sure. I'm waiting to try to find a chink in the armor. If I could see my dad suffering and get him to admit it.
Oh, a stoic. Yes.
Yes, yes.
England and China both are very famous for producing stoics.
Yeah, yeah. Now I can see that he's addicted to coffee.
Pardon?
I can see that he's addicted to coffee. I can see that he deals with immense stress, but he wears that as a badge of honor. He would have me stressed too.
Uh-huh. So perhaps the only out that you're going to have is that you are not your dad, and it's time that he began to figure that out.
Now, that would be an easier conversation to have if I believed it, or if I were brave enough, because there's still, aside from all of the conditioned stuff and the emotional stuff, there's still a fear in me when I look at, okay, Dad's way does provide a certain kind of security,
Right.
right? And
And
I'm
it, and it and it and it and that security is, let us say, kind of based on luck and other things. For instance, if your dad still has a mortgage on that house, he may in fact get kicked out of it,
yeah,
because literally millions of people in the United States believed that because they had a mortgage that they were safe. And then the bank started figuring out ways of, and one woman, in fact, the big story, as a shining example is that one woman in her 90s lost her house that was within a year of being completely paid for, and
wow,
that the amount of money that she was short was less than $1, and they still took her house.
that's obviously crookery, but it's an
Well, what do you
outside
think the
case.
real estate market has been for the past, what, 10,000 years or so?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Right, yeah. But it's an outside case, right? Those cases are rare. Most people who
Well,
have
like I said,
mortgages,
millions. That was an outside case only because of her age and how much she owed. Millions of people. Uh, in fact, the banks were trying to find ways to make people go just a little bit short or go a little bit behind, and then they could get them just by getting a little bit behind, because they would add fees and other things like that. And by the way, the guy who was most famous for doing that in California is now uh, the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States.
Of course he is.
He is, of course.
He's a perfect
Exactly.
candidate.
So wisdom says that your dad is not as safe as he thinks he is.
But surely there are many, many more millions who have had mortgages and kept their house.
Yes,
Who have had
my family is in that regard.
House.
I've got a house in North Carolina that has been up for sale for 5 years and unsold.
Right.
And I don't want to live in it.
Uh-huh.
Because I don't want to live in the United States. But yeah, I've got inherited property. I wouldn't have bought it on my own, but it's there. That was the rest home that my mom had, but the rest home is closed, and now the property is sitting. So property winds up in that regard being an albatross. The other side of the coin is that you've got dead land, or you've got land that you own, and you can't get anything out of it. In other words, that the ordinary right view winds up in attachment. I can't get anything out of it. I own the property. So long as it's a security blanket for your dad. I wanted to go back on another angle with that. That your dad wants to tell you what to do, and he wants you to do it because he tells you to do it. Is that correct? Does he get that connection?
I think because he wants me to be safe. I think it's because he wants what's best for me.
Never mind about that. Let's go. Never mind his motivation. Let's look at exactly what's going on. What's going on is that he's telling you what to do, and he expects you to do what he's telling you to do. Never mind his motivation.
I don't know that it goes as far as expectation. I think it's a well-meaning request, and I want what's best for you.
All right. And how old is he now?
Approaching 60.
Oh, he's not even 60 yet. So that means that he's still young enough to have a dad of 90 ordering him around.
My grandfather is my would he listen? I think he's still listening. So the way that my dad grew up was in small hotels that my grandparents owned. And he was made to help from a very young age, as was my auntie. My auntie has deep issues of resentment with my grandparents for making them work. My dad tells this story fondly and says that he instead sees it as a positive. They instilled in him a work ethic, which he's used to his great advantage.
And disadvantage, but never mind.
Right.
Everything balancing out. All right, well, that's a very interesting situation because it gives you plenty of new options for you to, let us say, investigate.
Right.
All right. One of them is that he had to work as a child. Did he make you work as a child?
No. Well, as a teenager, he became very insistent one day when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old that I go out and find a weekend job.
A weekend?
Yeah.
But the way you tell it, his story was that he was on the floor, scrubbing the floor 7 days a week.
Yeah. So I got the watered down version for sure.
All right. So perhaps even you got the watered down version of you do what I tell you to do also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's very much part of family structure. That's why we call it a lot of people don't understand why Sila Bhatta Paramasa is part of the nesting instinct. The answer is right, because the one person who tells us what to do our whole lives is Daddy, and we live in his nest.
Yeah. and that was certainly going on more in my younger years, my infant years, before my father had chilled out. He's much more relaxed now than he was. My mother tells me stories of my father not letting me leave the table until I'd eaten all my food and all of that kind of thing.
So he's still playing that game with you,
Perhaps.
and you're still playing it back with him. The question is, how can you become his friend instead of his what do they call it when people are playing a game like chess? Opponents.
Opponent.
Right. Okay. So you know now that he's playing a game. Don't be his opponent. Be his friend. In a way, you can actually help him beat up a Danny, the invisible Danny, the one that the both of you believe exists.
How?
Do you get what I'm talking about? In
No,
other
not
words,
quite.
when he says blah 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 and pointing the finger at you, instead of mentally you staying there getting hit by that, you mentally and in fact if possible physically go around on the other side with him and point your gun and say, "Yeah, you're right, Dad." This is what I'm trying to do is get you is to start agreeing with him about everything you do wrong. He'll love that. You started as long as you are in disagreement with him, he'll still pound you. But when you start agreeing with him, you do not have to get a mortgage. You just have to agree that that's the best thing to do. Art of warfare.
But isn't that deceit?
No, it's not, because you're giving him what he wants. You're giving him a gift, and you're not telling a direct lie to protect yourself. You're telling him a way to help him be happy. Like I said, the truth. You could go so far as to say that the real Buddha Dhamma does not deserve to live because it was hidden within the Sangha to keep it alive. It was hidden away. It needed to be hidden away. There's a way for you to hide away your Dhamma. And you're not telling a direct lie. You're not saying, "No, Daddy, I did not eat that chocolate cake," while I got cake on my face. Okay? You're giving him a gift that he wants. This is what right speech is all about. Defying speech, or telling him no, sounds harsh to him. And so if you're harsh to him, that's as much wrong speech as if you're directly lying to him.
Wow.
Wow.
So this brings me back to the notion that I have to be brave. If I'm gonna not only choose
A lion, huh? I
a
see a
lion,
cub coming. Yes, that's one of the qualities of the lion is that we are brave enough to follow the Dhamma. And so following the Dhamma in this regard is by being very best friends with your dad. You owe him a lot. You
but
do
it's
not
I
deserve to
know,
put him in through the pain of defying him. So there's a middle
but
path
I
for
mean,
you.
but he's he's gonna know that I don't have a mortgage.
Yeah, but he's going to know that next year. And so once a year you have this conversation or so, and every year it gets easier and easier.
But the reason that the bravery thing comes up is because not only am I choosing something other than what my father would prescribe for me, but I'm humoring him in his prescription while I do my own thing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm
Name
relinquishing his
me
guidance.
name me a less human thing to do. That is so human. In fact, they have Bible stories about it. This issue is in the Bible. The Bible story is that the man had two sons. One son, first he told one son and then the other son, one son told the father no, and the other one said yes. But the one who said yes, I will go work in the field, wound up not working in the field. And the one who said no wound up working in the field. All right? So put
Mhm.
that story together and figure out which son you want to be. For the longest time, I was the son who kept telling my family no, 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 but I wound up being what they wanted anyway. That's, but that path is not recommended. The path that I recommend is the path my sister took. In the sense that she would tell mom yes, 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 yes on everything, but she wound up not ever doing anything. Now the results were different, but that's the whole issue is that we need to, how to say, humor our parents. In fact, I think I mentioned this to you. If a cop stops you, and I'll go ahead, the way that I normally say it is somebody in a particular uniform with badges and all of that, riding around in an expensive extra painted car, and he's got lights and whistles and all of that. And if they blow those lights and whistles and he comes up to the door, a noble is going to know that that's just a poor man who is afraid, uptight, and wearing a suit that he's hiding behind. And he really has no power over me at all. But if I tell him that, he's going to make sure that I'm going to suffer. Because why? Because by telling him that, I've made him suffer. By telling that man the truth, he does not like the truth, and he's going to arrest me. He's going to find some reason or another to arrest me because I'm telling him the truth. The better way of saying it is, officer, I have Fifth Amendment rights. He's still going to probably bust my window with that. Um, but the whole point that I'm making is that police you have to cooperate with because they're not smart enough to recognize that an old fat happy man can dick with them, and he wins every time. They don't like that at all.
Now, I could do that with a police officer
Well, now
because
that
there's
you can see,
no
guess
personal
who's your
attachment.
original policeman? I rest my case there.
But what about being his friend?
Yes, that's the whole point. The more you cooperate, the better they like it. Cops, daddies, everybody who thinks they're in charge. They want to think and feel like they're still in charge. That's the gift you want to give your dad, that he's still the dad. And you agree with him. You should have a mortgage. And I'll see what I can do about getting one. Here, Dad, you want to go house shopping with me? That'll put the Quazoo on that when he starts to see what prices are now and mortgages.
He knows. He knows. He knows that it's harder to buy now than it was when he was my age. But he thinks that I should work myself hard enough to be able to afford it anyway.
But you and I already know that by being the best drum teacher in Bristol, that you've got an easy life already. Most of the guys at the age of 32, like you, are suffering and would really like to be in your position. But your dad didn't know that. And you're too humble to tell him. So you're beginning to understand the original part of this conversation was about knowledge. And the more knowledge you have and the more you understand things, then the easier your life is going to be, just like it is with criminals. Criminals don't want to be known.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have secrets. Well, sometimes those secrets are needed to protect something like the Dhamma, something valuable, or something valuable like the relationship with your dad. Sometimes we need to cover it over with leaves. That's an expression in the Dhamma.
Because if I keep sharing my understanding with them, it's going to harm my practice.
Well, it's going to harm them, keep them upset and uptight,
Yeah.
and so they'll find a way to harm you back. That's just the way the old karma machine works. Not the magical way, but the real way. So yes, this is the way to do it. Don't be defiant with your parents, but rather, and I remember telling you this a long time ago, but I said it in different ways. When you make up your choice, or when you make up your mind about which way you're going to go, they'll accept it. They will accept you as what you are. Eventually they will, just like my mom did. But it took her a long number of years, and I approached it wrongly. Eventually, the wrong way that I approached it kind of got in there, but there was I think acceptance for her came after respect, and that the
Mm.
respect that she had was because I was dedicated to being a monk, and I was a monk, a Buddhist monk. And that when I was a Buddhist monk in Thailand, that meant nothing to her. But seeing a Buddhist monk in the United States, I remember also taking another friend at a time when I wasn't ordained, and she was Catholic. I mean, she was Catholic, hardcore Catholic, and I took her to meet the abbot of the Cambodian monastery outside of Washington D.C. that had already been established in the 80s, and boy, was she blown away. What a difference between Catholic priest and this guy. All right, so that may be something eventually that when you show them what you are deep inside, they will get blown away in appreciation. That respect will come. But until then, you need to cooperate with them because they can't see things correctly because you haven't finished the job. You're still a work in art, a work in progress. So you can imagine even Michelangelo chiseling out the David. And as he's chiseling around, his mother-in-law comes by, and all she can see is these chunks of rock on the floor. Why don't you clean this place up? And why is it so dusty in here?
Go get a real job.
Huh?
Go get a
Yeah,
real
go
job.
get it. Exactly, right, exactly. Go get a real job. Okay, so you can see kind of the dilemma that you're in is
Yeah.
because you're still a work in progress. And so you need to hide the Dhamma until you're completed with your work of art and then allow them to appreciate the work of art. Until then, the public does not get to see the work of art.
And this takes real bravery.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Because you'll have the whole town trying to sneak that piece of cloth off of that piece of art so that they can take a peek at it, and it's not finished. It's not ready for public exhibition yet.
But also that I have none of the guidance systems that I've been living with my whole life to
Well, now you've
encourage me.
got the very best guidance system, which we've been instilling, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. In this regard, don't make dad suffer needlessly. You do not have to prove to him who you are yet because you're still a work in progress.
I still don't know who I am. I don't know that I ever will.
That's what
In
I mean, right?
fact,
We're just here chiseling on this darn piece of rock, and we don't even know that there's a David in there. It might
except
be a
yeah,
bull.
but except
It might be a horn or a lion or something.
or nothing at all.
Well, if you keep chipping away at it. But enough of those analogies. The important point is that we do have these responsibilities, and that we have these responsibilities mostly to our family. And that family connection is very, very well understood, but that family connection often shoves little boys into the Sangha, to where here the Westerners are doing what they can to keep Westerners out of the Sangha simply because your mom doesn't understand anything and doesn't want to know.
Yeah, they don't.
They don't want to know.
Nope.
And since they don't want to know, just like I have students sometimes who call, but they really don't want to know the Dhamma, so there's no reason to chase them.
Yeah, that's something that's kind of interesting me at the moment is all throughout my career I've had students come along who aren't really interested. How to deal with those students?
Do you need them? Instead of them, let's use it down to one. This next one student, do you need him?
No.
Okay. Then then we can experiment a little bit. And one of the ways that you can experiment is by start putting pressure on him. And the pressure that you can put on is, do you want to learn the drums? I think it's a lot of fun. Do you want to have fun with the drums? Then you have to put in right effort. And if you're not willing to put in right effort with the drums, then I'm not willing to put in right effort with you, kid. Be honest with you.
I did exactly that last week.
So you're already ahead of me. I'm just going to shut up and go away.
No, don't. I need someone to tell me what to do.
You already know. You already know what to do. You've already got that much wisdom, right? You can put him under pressure. You can say, if you're going to, do you want to do this? But you also have to hold out the carrot. So you have to use both the carrot and the stick within the same sentence.
Yep, I did that too.
What did he say?
I played for him and I made it look really fun.
Uh-huh.
Well, we reached the end of the lesson at that point, so I'm looking forward to seeing where he's at next time.
All right. Tell me what that comes out to. I'd be interested, because now you know that you can, in fact, take control of the situation, that you are, in fact, the one in charge here. You're the daddy in this house with the students, and you don't need them. That's the place that your dad is not ready to come to. He may be secure with a mortgage, etc., but he still needs you.
Oh, sure he does. Sure he does. Otherwise, why the fear before I went to Thailand?
Mm-hmm. All right. So now that you know that he needs you, going back to that, now that you know that he needs you, you can see that, do you need your music student? Not all of them as a group, but each one at that moment, individual in time, do you need them? Because if you do, you're not being the best teacher.
Correct.
But if you don't need them, then you can have fun with them, enjoy them. You can do that same thing with your dad. You don't need him, he needs you. So
Could
please
we
make
say...
it.
Sorry.
Even if you agree with everything he says, if he's in there saying, Danny, you're such a piece of shit, you come over and say, yeah, Daddy, that Danny is such a piece of shit. You're exactly right. And you repeat it exactly the way that he does, almost to the point of mimic him, to the point that he can hear it. He might, in fact, bust out laughing. He probably won't go that far. He'll probably be quite mild with it. But in any case, instead of being the object of his pointing, you go around and join him pointing at the same thing. Yeah, that's a very, very bad aspect. Yeah, not having a mortgage, that's terrible, especially in today's market. I mean, getting mortgages are so easy, aren't they, Daddy? And then you can go the route. Did your daddy ever help you? Can you help me get a mortgage, Daddy? Can you? Huh?
I suspect he might, if I really wanted to.
That's dangerous, isn't it?
Right.
That's dangerous. He might actually want you to, and go so far as to help you get one. Right.
Then I've got one.
That's a very, very interesting thing. I was a little bit older when let us say the information came out, and it dawned upon me that in fact I'm quarter in American Indian, probably Pawnee.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know that. But still, as a child, because I was raised in Oklahoma and knew a lot about Indian folklore, and one of the things that I really could understand was is that white man's got a really bad habit called land ownership that the Indians didn't. They didn't have a concept of land ownership. That whole thing has stayed with me my whole life. That I actually just inherently, and I didn't even know that it would come out of my genes. I really didn't, honestly. I didn't know that. that concept of non-ownership of land came right out of my genes. But the point that I'm making is that it's just an attitude. The attitude of you've got to have a house versus what a just terrible thing to do to Mother Earth by owning a piece of her butt and calling it mine when it doesn't belong to you at all. And it's hard for people to recognize that, in fact, when you own a house, the house owns you.
Yeah. I was
If you,
thinking about this kind of thing just yesterday evening, walking home from work. Thinking to myself, what if I'm wiser than my dad?
if you don't, I'm going to slap you upside the head. You have been so lucky. You have been to Thailand and he has not. You've understood the Dhamma and he hasn't. You put in a meditation practice. My goodness, man. Not only do you deserve it, I demand it from you, and you ought to demand it of yourself. Of course, you're more wise than your dad. Because of circumstances, not because you're better than he is.
Right.
You're not better than he is. You're just human. You're a suffering human. You haven't given up suffering yet, so you're not better than he is. But when you do, you will be. So long as you worry about it, you won't be. But when you give up worrying about it, you'll be free.
And they'll
And
still
you're
want me
on
to have a mortgage.
your way. Well, right now, your dad has a mortgage on your ass just as strong as he has a mortgage on paper.
Yep.
You're his son, and you need to behave like that in order to please him. But meanwhile, you're a drummer and you play your own music. You're a lion. You're on your way. But you can't hear. There is a piece of artwork, probably in oil. Most of the artwork is done in reds, oranges, and yellows. And basically, when you look at it closely, it's a pile of people in various stages of undress climbing a pyramid or let us say a cone. And at the bottom of it, it's like a pyramid in the sense of huge numbers of people on the bottom all getting stepped on. Just above them are people who are both stepping and being stepped on. Above them are more people being stepped on and are being stepped on and are stepping on other people. And at the top, you've got one guy who's saying, yeah, I'm at the top, while he's got 4 or 5 people who have their hands on his pants, pulling him back down. This is the humanity. All right, this is what we do. We are all in competition with one another. But the lion or the horn or the unique individual does not join that crowd. You see, your dad is looking for that house as his symbol for being at the top of his own little pile.
Mhm.
But we recognize that, oh no, I can be secure without a house. In fact, the house makes life a little more dangerous than it was. People who do a lot of nomads know this. But I'm not talking about just the nomads in the desert or in Mongolia or whatnot like that. But Buddhist monks are often on tudong, when in the sense of, and it's quite remarkable to realize that everything you own, you're carrying with you, and you're walking, and you got to struggle and carry everything you own. So when guys come from, in fact, I have to say it, I haven't seen Greg in a long time. He's one of my best friends. But when he first came to Thailand, he came with 3 backpacks and he left with one. But in his travels, he left crap from here to there. I mean, he left a string of stuff, including solar systems and things like that that we gave to the monks and we give to this person and the other person like that. What is he doing? He's lightening his load. But that was such a metaphor because that's in fact what we have to do is just simply lighten the load. And one of the loads that you're carrying around is this disconnection between you and dad. And so what we need to do to lighten your load is to lighten his load. To become his very best friend. Because you don't have to carry him around like that. Remember the Buddha's analogy was even if you carried your dad on your shoulders around your whole life, you wouldn't pay him back. But that's no invitation to actually do that. No need to actually do that. And it doesn't matter where the shoulders are, whether they're here or whether they're up here. You don't have to carry him around and you don't have to fight with him and you don't have to say, no, I'm going to go do it my way. No, the best way to do is make friends with him. He's your very, very best friend. And no, don't be.
Yeah. The difficulty that I feel about that is in not sharing everything with him. My image of a best friend is someone with whom you share everything.
No, you don't. You don't share things that are intentionally said to hurt, even if they're true. Whether they're about me or they're about you. You don't hurt your friends. If you were as honest with me as you think that you're going to be honest with your dad, every time you saw me, you'd say, you're ugly. But you don't. You don't, and you don't say it. But we both know it's true. Same thing with you. Now you're lying. So anyway, no hair, no teeth, and a face full of wrinkles is normally what people put on their list as stuff. So anyway, you get the point of what I'm talking about, that you don't intentionally say things to your friends that are hurtful, and it doesn't matter who they're about. Okay? That's an important quality, that you do not have to straighten this out. Like I said, it took me 25 years to straighten it out with my mom, but it really came about when she saw something that was worthy of respect. And the other thing that I can say on that is you've got it easy because all your dad's worried about is some money. My mom had much bigger issues. She was carrying around entire church buildings, gods, devils, hells, heavens. I mean, really big stuff. And that's real security issues there because of what the stories that they tell. So notice that it's going to take a long, long time, and that it's what you show them that's going to eventually bring the respect. Therefore, what you say to them should not be trying to, well, shouldn't I be honest with my friends? Yes, but you don't do things to hurt them. So don't do things to hurt your dad. One of the things, a way of doing that's by agreeing with him. Make some magical Danny the villain.
feels strange. Feels dishonest.
The honesty, though, is in the Dhamma in the sense of suffering and no suffering. So if that's the criteria, then in this regard, having a little white lie causes less suffering. And that's been known throughout history. There are ways that you don't have to lie to your dad, but I don't think that you've got quite the mental dexterity to be his best friend and tell him everything he doesn't want to hear at the same time.
Not yet.
So in that regard, do a 1-2 punch. Don't do it all at one time. Okay? The 1-2 punch, the first punch is to get him on your side because you're on his side. I always recommend that to young men with their dads. I wish somebody had told me that.
Huh.
That community, trust, togetherness, and that kind of stuff is far more important than brutal honesty. And so when your dad says you ought to get a job, you're saying, well, I'm doing not only the best I can, but quite well at that. So let's go on to the next one. You say, oh, I want to have a mortgage. Well, I'm better off than most kids my age, and none of us can afford a mortgage like you could have had. Why don't you, if you want me to have a mortgage, Dad, would you put your name on my name on your mortgage? In other words, start to play with him. Become his best friend. Tease him with this stuff. Because here's the last part, and that is your only other option is expressed this way. The teenage girl at the age of 14 is all dolled up, going out, and Daddy says, you cannot go out tonight. And then she plays victim. Daddy! And eventually it gets down to he's saying, this is my house. You have to do it my way if you're going to live here. All right? Now, the right thing for the girl to have done was to go back to her room, whether she stomps or not, and then crawl out the window. But to actually pack her goods and leave the house is great suffering for her, great suffering for her daddy. It's the worst thing. But what she's doing is she's being honest with him. I'm going to do what I want to do, and if I have to leave you to do that, that's what I'm going to do. Well, Danny, you're wiser than most 14-year-old girls. At least most
so.
often you are. Not all the time. Most of the time. So this is the way that we're looking at it. Don't look at it in the sense of that you're being dishonest with him, because you know already that the only way to be honest in this regard is to hurt him, because he is not willing to hear the truth. Remember, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, but first it's really going to piss you off. Don't piss your dad off. Gosh, you look like you're growing old right in front of me. Wow, this wisdom must really be sinking in. I was watching your face there, and it just went. It was just so focused. I mean, I should have kept my mouth shut and let you finish that process. But it looked like that's what was happening. You were beginning to see, yeah, that your relationship with your dad is important. The way your dad feels is important. You owe him that. That in fact, you owe him more than just your defiant honesty.
Yeah. And that requires courage.
Yes.
Because I
The
sacrifice
courage
his
of a
guidance.
bull, the courage of a lion, the courage of someone who has a unified mind, etc., like that. Yeah, that's what it takes. It takes courage to be. In fact, you could go so far as to say, yeah, it takes real courage to be the friends of our enemies. Because everything says to stay enemies with enemies. Because they're dangerous. They're liars. They want to hurt me, etc., like that. So not just dads, but it takes courage to be friends with enemies. But it takes courage to be friends with dad when he feels a little bit like an enemy. So times have changed, generations have changed, the wisdom is yours, and therefore you're responsible. Because you know the responsibility. You're the one who's responsible here. That's part of the Dhamma that I haven't really told you much about. And that is that as we grow in the Dhamma, we recognize more and more and more how not just now, but all along I've had enormous responsibilities to the Dhamma that I didn't even see before. And that was the reason I was suffering, was because I wasn't applying myself and adhering to the Dhamma. We can break Daddy's rules. We cannot break the rules of the Dhamma without suffering. And so that higher Dhamma is, in fact, you can see that you're suffering because you're not taking care of him. That you would rather be honest with him, even if it's painful for him. And in regard to that, it's back painful for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you recognize that, oh, I have a responsibility to people to not cause them suffering. And if I've got wisdom, if I've got knowledge that's going to cause them suffering, now is not the time to use that particular weapon. Because I do not have to win the argument between Daddy and me. My job is not to win the argument, and that may be part of the problem. You cannot win that argument. Only he can win that argument, or both of you lose.
I very much want him to see my point of view.
No, you don't. You just want to. I know you do. That's the selfishness. Because then you'll be acceptable on your own terms. That's not going to happen for a while. You need to become acceptable on his terms first.
I'm struggling with that one.
I know.
I need to be acceptable
That was a
on
little
his
too deep.
terms. I need to be acceptable on his terms first.
Yes. You have to become acceptable on his terms first. And then he will be accepted. Then you'll be acceptable on your terms later.
That's what I'm saying currently.
And what you're saying currently is that you demand of him to accept you on your terms. And he can't do that.
Right, but
So you have to figure your way around it so that you can become acceptable on his terms.
Even without the mortgage.
Even without the mortgage. The mortgage is optional.
Okay, I
The
get it.
mortgage accept is optional because this has got nothing to do about money and mortgage. It has everything to do with relationship between Danny and Daddy.
Okay.
And I think all young budding Buddhas need to hear this particular stuff because every one of them is going to have to go through it at some time or another. I know I had to do it. And like I said, I kind of screwed it up, and so it took me 25 years. But I kind of got her. I nailed her. Mama loves it. So that's how you have to work on it. You need to work on it in the sense of becoming acceptable to him on his terms. And you do that by being agreeable. You agree with him, and you can wing it about what to do about a mortgage, but I know that neither one of us has an intention of actually going out and getting one.
So why fuck about? Why even try to pretend like I want one?
Because if you don't, he'll suffer.
Right.
And that's where wisdom about suffering really starts to come in, is when we recognize all suffering, almost all, it always happens directly, but most of it happens indirectly. If you make somebody else suffer, it comes right back. A clear example, by the way, of that is shoplifting.
Uh-huh.
Do you know that everyone who shoplifts is suffering and in pain before they put the object in their pocket?
I can see that, sure.
Yeah, they're full of fear, they're full of anxiety, they're looking for every camera, they're looking for anything like that. Why is that? Because they know they're doing wrong. And in that regard, that's how feelings work. And as people cannot see the distinction, they think that, oh, I feel bad because I was shoplifting. Oh no, you were shoplifting while you were feeling bad. The bad feelings came before the shoplifting, not the other way around. And if you get caught, then the pain really gets big, but it's still a mental state.
Uh-huh.
Just because you got caught shoplifting doesn't mean anything. If you're really, really sharp, you can talk whoever it was that caught you right out of it, right there on the spot.
Hmm.
But most people can't do that because they're so uptight with the fact that they've been caught and they were already in a miserable state before they shoplifted. And unfortunately, I got to tell you, I know all about this because I've been there and done that too. Luckily enough, that was a long time ago, but it's still there. And it's
Yeah.
a memory. Yeah. So the pain about, and so they say, well, why don't we shoplift if we get away with it? The answer is you're not going to get away with it, even if you don't get caught. You're not going to get away with it. You're going to make yourself miserable instead. You'll be your own police in that regard. But in
Right.
any case, this idea of recognizing that we have responsibility to our parents and that you have to give them gifts that they want, that you cannot force feed. You can't do that. You can't
Yeah.
force feed him. Give him food he likes to eat.
And sneak some Dhamma in there.
And snake
Well, he's not looking crush
exactly,
the pills up.
exactly. And then flavor that food that he likes to eat with Dhamma. Exactly so. You've got it. But you cannot force feed him Dhamma, and you cannot force feed him, this is who I am. Because what he wants is he wants you to be Danny Boy. He wants you to be his son. You need to do that.
Which makes his love conditional and makes his sentiments of trusting me and me being able to trust myself conditional.
Yes, unfortunately, that's the definition of love. It is conditional. If I like it, it's good. If I don't like it, it's bad. Full stop. That's just the way the world works. Now, the Christians, with their idealism and their idealistic way of looking at things, say, oh no, there's a deeper love, right? And you find a daddy is in the process of spanking his little daughter. And immediately upon confronting, he'll say, oh no, I love her. Well, when you're hitting her, you don't love her. You're not, I mean, so we don't love people all the time, especially if we have
Right.
an ordinary mind. It's not trained well enough to stay in love, even if that's what we're supposed to do because of some rule or another. Oh, fathers are supposed to love their sons. Maybe they made that rule because it was so flagrantly violated already. I mean, history is really strewn with either children as sacrifice, or worse still, young men knocking off their daddy in order to get control of their situation. I think, in fact, that happened again with Donald Trump. That when his dad got old, they set up a whole bunch of books so that they could steal all of daddy's money and not pay any tax on it, and daddy doesn't know. But that's also in the Bible with the what is it? Selling your birthright for a mess of porridge.
Right.
Okay, and that just goes on and on and on. So young men are not loyal to their fathers, and fathers are not loyal to their sons. Sorry.
It's
No,
conditional.
I think just that it is absolutely conditional. So now that you know that your daddy's love is conditional, not because that's a very strange thing and society knows better, but no, society is wrong. Daddies don't automatically love sons ever. They only own them when they have pleasure from that son. And when that son gives them bad feelings, or they think that it's the son who gives them the bad feelings, immediately that love turns to something else. And sometimes it's armed. So, in that way of looking at the world in general, just at the ordinary level, you still have that responsibility as a son to remain a son to the dad, because the dad expects you to remain a son, which means to please him. Because when you don't please him, you're going to be an enemy, even though he's been told by his church to love his son, to love his neighbor, until they screw up. And the only way that you can screw up is by disagreeing with dad. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this off, because this has kind of been a one note song, and we played this note quite a long time today.
A
So
good song
go.
nonetheless.
Yes, it's a good song. Go be joyful with your dad.
Okay.
Agree with him. Make it
Mhm.
a joke.
Mhm.
Mimic him. Plus, at the invisible you, or the magical you, right along with him.
Okay.
Don't play the game with him as opponent.
Mhm.
Play his game with him as if you were a team player on his team,
Mhm.
and make the enemy magical. Now that you know that trick, go apply it. Figure it out, because you'll have to think hard in the moment of what to say to him to be on his side rather than the opponent that he's pointing at.
Mhm.
Because, see, he's confused. You're not. Don't let his confusion be your confusion. Remember, you're his friend. Again, it's sati. In this case, satipanya, to be wise with him. You don't have to convince him of how good you are the way you're doing it now. You only have to convince him that you're a good son. All of the
Mhm.
rest will come later.
Okay.
And call back soon. I want to hear what this is going to. I want to hear all about it.
I'm going to see him tonight, one on one.
Excellent, excellent.
I'll let you know.
That would be good. Take him out. Get him alone. If you can, take him to a restaurant and pay for the meal.
We're getting the takeaway in. It's already settled. I try to pay. Sometimes he
Well,
lets me.
one of the things that you can do, though, is that have you already called it in for the
Not yet.
takeout? Okay. Well, then what you can do is you can show up at the door with the takeout that you were going to order. Beat him to his own
Yes.
game in that regard.
Yes. Okay.
And in that regard, the more you act just like him, the better he'll like it.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing what he tells you not to do. But if you're, because in fact, if he's in the habit of getting or paying for it, then you can reverse that, and by doing so, you're behaving just like he would behave, and he loves it. Even if he yells at you, he still loves it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Okay, Danny. Good luck. We'll hear what happens later.
Thank you, Dhammarato.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.